Hi everyone, on today's episode I'm going behind the life of Brett Archibald. South African born Brett has been an international businessman and entrepreneur who built an impressive global career within hospitality and travel. He's a family man, married with 2 children. However, back in April 2013, his life changed forever. Brett was on a friend's 50th birthday and whilst on a charter boat in the early hours of the morning crossing the Mentawai Strait off Sumatra in Indonesia, Brett was violently ill and the next thing he fell overboard into the Indian Ocean. He was 60 miles from land in a strait that covers thousands of square miles. Alone, Brett used incredible mental and physical strength to survive 28 and a half hours. It gave him time to think through his life and used positivity to keep him from almost certain death. In shark-infested waters, Brett's survival story is one that will go down in folklore, and you can read his remarkable story in a book called Alone, Overboard in the Indian Ocean. It's an absolute pleasure to have him on the show today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Behind the Life of Brett Archibald. Hi Brett, how are you?
Hey Adam, I'm doing great and very happy to be catching up with you at long last.
At long last, I say it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Yeah, we've spoken the odd text over the last few months, and your life story is absolutely gripping. And not only the book about your survival, but actually when I read the book, it's a bit of a memoir as well. The amount of times that you were flashing back through your past from your childhood as well, yeah. Brett. Can you just sort of tell me about your childhood, where you grew up?
Absolutely. Without a doubt, I think, Adam, in deciding to publish this book, I had to think about it very carefully, because I think if you're going to tell a story of this kind of ilk, you have to go right into the basics of what makes you tick and put your whole life story on the line. And it was a tough decision, but at the time, my children were just too young to understand the enormity of what had happened to our family. And so that was really the reason why I wanted to publish this book, and found an amazing lady to work with who wrote the story, and we took it from there. But I knew I had to give some background to my life in order to really show the character of the person in the ocean, and I fundamentally believe that so many things that have happened in my life led me to that place. Not to the place in the ocean, but to the thought processes and structure that I put around my mind, going back to my childhood and working through all the people that I remembered, good, bad, ugly, indifferent, because all those played a massive role in me surviving. I fundamentally believe that. And it was all part of, I grew up in a tiny little town outside of Durban on the coast of Natal, now called KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. We were a little small town of probably a new village at the time in the early 60s, a place called Westville, not far from the sea. Once we all were we discovered the ocean and our thrill and passion of surfing, it was incredible in those times. We didn't have a proper motorway. I mean, there was an old 2-lane motorway going up into the foothills of Natal, and we used to stand 5 o'clock in the morning. You'd look up and down this motorway, and there'd just be kids from of all ages standing on the side of the motorway, hitchhiking down to the beach and spending the entire day on the beach and coming back exhausted, sunburned, collapsing and repeating on Sunday, So I grew up in a family with three siblings, 2 siblings and 3 children, and my mum and dad. We had a hectic time. I mean, my dad was diagnosed. In those days, they didn't know bipolar. It was called manic depression. And so our family was pretty much ripped apart at a young age, through no fault of anybody. I mean, just a very sad story. My dad was an incredible man, a very bright guy, and just seriously and sadly afflicted, and forced my mum back into the workplace. So we grew up in both parents working, and didn't see much of our parents. But my mum was an incredible, and still is an incredible woman who kept our family together. You know, she went out there, got a job, kept us all going through school, kept the family going, managed to keep us in our home. And you know, I look back, whilst as tough as it was, I think it taught me many, many lessons. It taught me, I grew up very quickly, and I had a very grown-up view of life, I think, from a very young age of around 9 years old when my dad had his first breakdown. So I think all those things created and molded me into the person I became. We also, South Africans, at the time, we had conscription. You had to go and attend military service for 2 years after school. I certainly think that instilled a massive amount of discipline, structure, focus into our lives, as bad as it was. And it's like anything, you know, you take the positives. Most of human nature takes the positives, and you can kind of tend to forget the negatives in many situations. So, but also a thing that caused me to rebel. I did not like, after having been in the military, I did not like to be told what to do, and kind of branched out in many things on my own. I ended up taking a completely different career path, I guess, to what my folks wanted me to do. But I certainly think all those building blocks stood me in good stead, and led me right up to that moment where I found myself 100 kilometers or 60 miles out to sea, and no one around me, in the worst storm in 35 years.
Yeah, I'll say we'll go over the event shortly, because I know it's something that you've replayed and you spoke about many times, and it is really a story of tough mental strength. And you were talking about your childhood there. Modern day life, it goes a million miles an hour, and we don't have a chance to reflect on how life goes. And what came across in your book was, even though it was the most horrible of circumstances for those 20 and a half hours, you were able to reflect on your life. And you mentioned about your father, because he suffered a full mental breakdown. Was it when you were 7 years old as well? You put in the book that you saw me, he tried to commit suicide. Yeah. Did that give you the real, strong mental strength to actually get through something like this that you went through those years ago?
That's a very interesting question. I don't think I've been asked that before. Off the top of my head, I would, I was 9, and I mean the shock and horror of seeing I idolized my dad at the time, and to see your hero in that kind of situation was really hectic and radical. And I think also the human spirit has the ability to suppress the true emotions that are evoked in situations like that. But I found it, I was very, very blessed. My proper career in the hospitality industry took off at the end of the 80s, and the company I joined, I will always be grateful to my boss at the time. He introduced us to this incredible mentor of our board of management, and through this guy I learned so much about myself. And interestingly, at one time we were doing a life change. So basically you go back to as far as you can remember in your life, and you plot a axis, and every 5 years you mark out on the horizontal axis, and on the perpendicular axis you have your highs and lows, and whether it went below the median of the axis. And it was an incredible exercise, and I probably hadn't thought about it. And it's suddenly, while I was doing that in my second 5-year span, my axis just crashed through the bottom. I mean, my lifeline just crashed. And I actually remember putting my pen down and getting up and walking out of the room, and I went and sat outside, and I just went, I haven't ever thought about that. But now we were doing this intense workshop, and I ended up working with this coach for many, many years, and I'm still in touch with him, and he's kind of a very solid mentor to me. And it was it was an amazing, amazing experience for me, because whilst I can't say that seeing that experience, or seeing that going through that situation with my father, that it had gave me a mental strength while I was in the ocean, it did create a channel for me to talk to my dad a lot, which, if you've read the book, there are many, many moments where I, to the point of saying, you know, Bully, where are you? Are you up there? Are you down there? Where am I going? Asking all. Yeah. Because I knew I was going to die. I just didn't know how or when. You know, I mean, I was completely convinced that this is where my last days were going to, my last hours, they were numbered, and this I was going to have a watery grave. So, yeah, I think I'll have to ponder on that question a bit longer.
Yeah, well, let's go to the night of the 17th of April. Well, actually, the early hours, 2:15 in the morning. You were on the upper deck. You had, in fact, most of you on board had terrible food poisoning. It was your friend Tony Singleton's 50th, meant to be a great 50th lads holiday away surfing.
Yeah, it was Wayne Madden, not
Wayne
Tony.
Madden.
Yeah, Tony was the organizer of the whole, but it was Wayne's 50th. Yeah.
So it was Wayne's 50th, and you were on the upper deck, as you said before. It was a terrible tropical storm, and the next thing you passed out, and you woke up in the ocean, and you could see the boat ahead of you. How far ahead was it? Because obviously it was very dark at the time. Could you just see the lights on the boat?
It was quite, you know, but it's so interesting, because the lights on the top deck were on. The lights at the back, the stern of the boat, were on, where the night duty guy was sitting in a plastic chair, fast asleep, despite the boat going all over the place. And I had been violently ill. In fact, I'd been sitting in one of the heads of the boat for close on 45 minutes, literally with diarrhea and vomiting, and I actually thought I was going to die. And I remember on my way, I'd seen a friend of mine, he got stuck in his cabin, because he had a sliding door, and the door was bashing, and he locked the door to stop the noise, and woke up feeling incredibly ill, like myself, and needed to get to the bathroom, but broke the key off in the lock. So as I came up out of the hole to go to the restroom, the bathroom, the sight that greeted me was this friend of mine just vomiting into his toiletry bag, you know, and the other friend who was sharing a cabin with, sitting with these huge big eyes on the bottom bunk, just watching this giant of a man be violently ill. I went into the bathroom, came out, and all I knew was I needed fresh air. And I walked out to the back of the boat to find my friend Banger just lying there. He'd grabbed a salad bowl, a plastic salad bowl. He didn't even try and make a bathroom. I was literally lying on the deck of the boat on the bottom level, with waves washing over the back, diesel fumes everywhere. And I said to him, we need to get to the top deck. We both got up to the top deck. He lay down on a bench there, and he said, just find out how long we've got to go. And I went into the skipper's cabin. There was a little fridge. I grabbed us both a Coke. Yeah. I knew I was dehydrated and needed liquid, and was convinced he was in the same boat. Asked the skipper how long to go, and received a reply of 10 to 12 hours, Mr. Brett. And I remember nearly wanting to throttle this guy. I'm a skipper. I'm a qualified skipper. I looked down and saw on our GPS where we were. It was now 2:25 a.m., so I'd been ill for over an hour. And I looked down, and I mean, we weren't even halfway into the crossing, and we were meant to have arrived on the other side at around about 6:30 a.m. and gone straight for a surf. And I remember screaming at the skipper, going out, telling Benoit that we've got 10 to 12 hours of this. He started vomiting again. And I'd had this Coke, and this Coke just literally, I think it hit the bottom of my intestine and just came shooting back up. And I walked quickly to the railing, was holding on the railing, and I vomited. And I still remember this so clearly. The first vomit was an incredible projectile vomit. I remember saying to myself, I was holding on two poles, I said, hey, good one, Brett. Second one wasn't so good. And the third one, I just remember this pain exploding in the back of my head. And I thought, if I vomit like that again, I'm going to black out. And the next thing we worked out afterwards, I fell 6 meters from the top deck, hit the water. I got sucked under the boat into this white turbulent water. My head popped up and I was in a dream, but my head popped up and I felt like my mates were flicking water on my face. I thought I was still in my bunk. And I opened my eyes and literally I was behind this boat. I reckon the guys were not even, well, when I know almost to a distance, because earlier on that evening, we had a tender boat out on a 50-meter rope behind our boat, and it started filling up with water because of the severity of the storm. So I'd helped the skipper pull it in onto a 20-meter rope, so it literally was just bouncing like a cork behind the boat. And when my head popped up, that's how close I was. I reckon I was probably 10 meters behind the boat. I could see the lights on. I could see Boy, the engineer, fast asleep. I could see Benoit lying on the bench at the top. And next minute, this tin boat went past my head. And I was like, and I suddenly realized I was in the ocean. I was like, oh, my first thought was, I have to catch that tin boat. And I just put my head down and swam with everything I had. I don't think I did more than 10 strokes and suddenly realized the futility of what I was doing. I lifted my head up. The tin boat was now probably 20 meters away. My boat was there. Banger and Boy were in. It was pitch dark around me, but the lights were shining so brightly on the boat. I could see that, but they were going up and down in the swell. Yeah. And I screamed, Adam, I screamed. I can't even tell you. I mean, I thought my lungs were actually going to come out of my throat. I screamed so hard, but the noise of the storm, the engines, no one heard me. They just kept going.
Well, you put in your book that a lot of people's worst nightmares is dying by drowning. At what point, even early on in that stage when the boat had gone, did you think, this is it now? I'm gonna drown to death? Was that almost immediate after that, or?
No, absolutely immediately. I mean, literally, as I realized, when I say I screamed the word "hey" 3 times so loudly that even now, whenever I say that word, it almost feels like this rasping feeling in my throat, because I screamed that word 3 times so loudly in the hope that someone would hear. And as I said the third one, I just knew that no one could hear me. I mean, the noise of the waves and the swell smashing around me, I mean, it drowned my own thoughts out. And I remember after shouting those things, I think it was probably incredulity that I just watched this boat go away. I knew where I was. I just looked on the GPS and my brain went, Brett, this is where you die. Yeah. Interestingly, I was never scared. I never felt fear at all in the entire time. But anger, my first emotion was the most indignant anger. I mean, I remember looking skies and just screaming. I'm not a religious, well, at the time, I mean, I'm a very spiritual person. I remember just looking skywards and screaming at God about how unfair this was. What am I doing in the ocean? I can tell you, 7 years on, that if anybody had come up to me up to that stage in my life and said, I'll bet you anything, your family, your home, your car, your bank balance, that you will fall off a boat in your lifetime, I would have taken that bet. Because no ways. I mean, I am so cautious. I check things. I'd gone to find where the life jackets were when we boarded the boat. I found them in a locked cupboard down by my cabin. And I remember having a huge fight with the skipper around it, asking him what a stupid place to put life jackets. In fact, I should have been the one to insist that they were put on deck. I know how bad the storm was. When I walked out, I should have put a life jacket on. But when you're that ill and all you can think about is survival, then you wake up in the water and you know you're not going to survive. I was just angry that my life was being taken away from me and I wasn't ready for it.
It's at what stage, because there's quite a funny bit in the book where obviously you were in the middle of the ocean, pitch black, you still got food poisoning, and I won't go too much into details, but he's still taking his shorts down.
No, you can. I mean,
Yeah, still taking your shorts down to because you've got a terrible case of diarrhea, and then you think to yourself, why am I doing this?
Yeah, yeah. It was. I had to go. I had to make a number 2 3 times, and I can't tell you. I'd fallen overboard with a t-shirt and a pair of shorts on, and a belt. And I remember I swallowed so much water, so I vomited 2 or 3 times very quickly once I was in the water. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I can't vomit anymore. I had nothing when I fell overboard because I'd been vomiting for 45 minutes. Now I'm swallowing salt water and I'm vomiting that up. And then my bowels exploded. And I remember talking to a psychologist afterwards and saying, why? It was actually a psychologist come sports scientist, and said, why did I do that? I knew I was going to die. Why did I undid my trousers, pulled my zipper down, pulled my trousers down, my boxers down, did what I had to, had a wash, pulled them back up, did the button up, did the zipper up. And I cannot tell you the amount of energy I expended doing that every time. And then I'd go into these cramps. My hamstrings would cramp, my glutes would cramp, my feet. I think from kicking, my toes would go into this cramp. And I remember thinking, this is the most bizarre thing. Why are you worrying about having to do this? I mean, and taking your trousers off. You're in the ocean. And it was so interesting because speaking to this sports scientist afterwards, he said, I want to share with you the power of the human will to survive. And he said, your subconscious had already decided you were going to survive this. And you will not be, he said, these were his words. He said, you did not want to be found when you were rescued with a poo bum. And that's why you did what you did. Yeah. Yeah. And I remember going, that is garbage. That cannot be true. He said, I'm telling you, that's why you did it.
But then
I'm still not sure that I buy into that 100%, but it made sense. I mean, it makes complete and utter sense.
But then there was obviously a sense a few hours later where you were gathering your thoughts and you set a business up in your head. So there was Bob, Hillary, and Emily.
Listen, that's not a few hours later. That is now in the second night. When I did that, I'd been in the water probably for around, I think it was probably about hour 13 or 14. And it was quite interesting. No, it was much later than that because 12 hours later, my boat came back and left again.
Yeah.
So that it was late that night. You know, I had this weird hallucination in that. Well, it actually wasn't. I saw the moon for the first time, so it must have been around about midnight because I remember the moon being straight above me. So it must have been close to the witching hour. I kept feeling myself falling asleep, and it was quite interesting because I remember, I don't know why, my brain said, Brett, form a company. And I was cramping at the time. And I was talking to myself. So what are you talking about, form a company? Yes, you the CEO, and you've got to have sales, marketing. And it was bizarre. Adam, I named my left nostril Hillary, sales, my right nostril Emily, marketing, and my mouth Bob. And Bob was production.
Yeah.
And there's so many interesting coincidences and weird synchronicity. When my boat got to Tour Paget, to the other side, and they realized that I was missing, and our skipper went to report me at the Port Authority that he had a man overboard, he didn't know my surname. He only knew my first name. And in the ship, in the Port Authority log at 10:23 a.m. on the morning of the 17th of April, 2013, there's a record there. And because he didn't know my surname, I'm registered as Brett Overboard, Bob, the acronym.
Right.
So I've got Hillary, Emily, and Bob. I had voices for all three of them. I'm not going to do the girls' voices. It was quite embarrassing. I had these voices, but I talked. It was so incredible. I said, okay, guys, I'm the boss. We're in a serious situation with our business here. We are floundering. Our company's going nowhere. We've got no sales going. Okay, Hillary, sales director, tell me, what do we need to do? What does this company need to do? And she said, boss, you've got to count. Sales is about numbers. We need numbers in this equation now. And I started counting 1,001, 1,002, just doing, linking it to I was just doing breaststroke. I didn't swim to get anywhere. I swam to keep my head above water. So I counted, pull my leg, pull my arms, count, kick my legs, pull my arms, kick my legs. I said to Emily, the marketing director, I said, Emily, come on, girl, what's the right thing for a market? What is it? What does a successful company need? She said, boss, it needs energy. It needs enthusiasm. We've got to sing. And I started belting out songs. I was singing Elton John. I was singing Queen. I was singing Elvis. But what was so interesting, any song I sang that had, it's so weird. I mean, I can't sing, number one. My kids never let me sing. I've been singing all day. I'm now singing, talking to Emily, but I think I must have fallen asleep because I remember this cacophony of sound in my head. And it was the girls screaming at me. They're saying, look at the boss, sleeping on the job again. Wah, wah, wah. And I remember Bob in this deep, gruff voice saying, boss, keep your head up. If your head's in the water, production can't work. I can't breathe. Mouth needs to be open. Legs are strong. Lungs are strong. Production needs, get your head up. And I said, guys, I cannot lift my head. And they all three started screaming at me to the point that I said, okay. And I lifted my head. And I think if that hadn't happened, I think I would have just, well, I knew I was falling asleep because it happened so many times. But the water and all these hallucinations and stuff that happened, they made me lift my head up again, and then I could keep going. You know?
Well, as we touched on with the storm that was happening, that's for your first real full day in the sea. There was the huge waves that you were having to battle against.
Yeah. If
that storm wasn't there and it had just been bright and beautiful for the first day, do you think you might have died? Do you think the storm kept you alive?
Well, I certainly think in the beginning, the severity of the storm, it was one of the worst storms they'd had in that region in many, many years. And the waves were literally 2, 3, 4 meters at a time. I mean, I remember literally seeing these waves, these crested waves, white water rolling down these swells, and me having to take a breath and go under and come up the other side. Because when I tried to just stay in one place and tread water, I found I couldn't see a wave coming, and then it would hit me over the head, it would push me under, I'd end up swallowing so much water. So it made me have to fight initially. I don't know. That's a very interesting question. I certainly, if it had been a beautiful day in terms of, so I was very lucky. It was that entire falling over 2:30 a.m. through that whole day, right until darkness that evening. The sun never came. The sun peeped out once towards the end of the day as the sun was setting, and it peeped. A couple of rays of sunlight came through the cloud. But other than that, it was cloudy, overcast, and lots of rain. I mean, that certainly helped me. I managed to get, and I remember the taste. I remember lying on my back trying to make a funnel with my hands and trying to get fresh water. And I remember tasting the difference between when I did get a few drops of rainfall in my mouth. I remember the sweetness of that water compared to, because you can't help it. You know, you've got to breathe. The nostrils can't breathe. So I'm breathing with my mouth open all the time, and I couldn't help it. I just ended up swallowing liters and liters of salt water. But another thing that, again, that the scientists figured out to help me, you know, because what happened was, because the waves are breaking, so I guess if it had been calm, I wouldn't have swallowed as much water.
Yeah.
But I swallowed so much water, so my bladder is now extended. I need to relieve my bladder. And every time I urinated, I can't tell you the pain. It was like this boiling liquid coming out my urethra from my own insides. But that pain, I can't tell you. I mean, the anger the pain created, often I think I might have been falling asleep, and now my bladder voided, and the burning sensation, I'm awake, I'm angry, I'm fighting. So it definitely played a role. There's no doubt about it.
But still at that stage, you're not scared.
No, I Adam, I was never scared. I mean, I knew I was going to die. I was angry because I didn't know how or when, and I didn't feel it was my time. But I wasn't, it was almost, I guess when I watched my boat sail away, I remember saying to myself, Brett, this is where you'll die. I just didn't know how or when. But then I got angry, and anger coming through in weird and wonderful forms certainly helped me keep going. But I never, ever was scared. Even right through on the second, I'd swum through the second night now, and it was daytime, and I was really cramping badly, and I could see land, and I knew I wasn't going to get there. I didn't feel fear. It was more curiosity around how I died. You know, did I drown? Did I get eaten by a shark? What?
Yeah.
No, it's still so weird. But you see, again, the sea's my happy place. I'm very, very happy in the ocean. My very special place.
You mentioned before, your friends didn't realize until several hours later that you were missing. Speaking to them, and it is obviously documented in the book. How chaotic have they told you the scenes were on the boat that morning? Because they were searching for you high and low, weren't they?
Oh, it was. You know, we really drilled down into this in depth. They got to the other side. It's now literally 6.5 hours later, nearly 7 hours later, where my cabin mate, he's sitting there eating his breakfast, and I've bit of a leader and a bit of a prankster and a very loud booming voice, and he went, "Where's that bloody foghorn, Archibald? He's not around. I can't hear him." But he also knew that I'd been very, very ill the night before. He thought I'd gone to another bunk, another room, another cabin to crash there. And he'd walked up, not knowing that this one other chap had swapped bunks. So he was this other, in fact, the birthday boy, Wayne Mudder, was lying in this one bunk, and James walked past, saw this body lying there and thought it was me. So they ignored it for a while. And then another mate, Tony Singleton, said, "Has anybody seen Arch?" And then the guys surfaced from all the bunks. And then JM walked past that bunk where he thought I was. And now there was no one in that bunk because it was Wayne, and he was in the breakfast room in the galley. And they suddenly went, and then they started looking. And I mean, they shared with me, Craig he opened the drawers of the drawers in the galley,
yeah.
Knives and forks, goes, "Brett, are you in here?" You know, looking in a drawer. I think their brains were just so shattered, that they realized. And then they hunt. I mean, they literally walked that boat from top to toes to see if there was any blood anywhere, to try and figure out where had I fallen. And it was only there. I mean, so when Bang and I were on the top deck, Mark Ridgway had come up to check on us, and I reckon it must have been a minute or two before I fell overboard, because I was standing at the railing where I fell from, and he came up and he said, "How are you guys doing here?" And I said, "Reggie, I don't think I've ever been this sick in my life before. I actually feel like I'm going to die." And he said, "Downstairs is carnage. There's just vomit, spewing. Guys are in the bathroom." He said, "I'll come back and check on you guys in a while." Then he went back downstairs. He was helping guys there. And then I went overboard. Banger came round. I mean, he was in his own personal hell. He staggered down to his bunk, and it was only by 10 o'clock the next morning. It's now 7.5 hours by, and they go, "Oh my God, I think their time was." I often talk about it in my inspirational story that I share around the world. You know, when we reflect on this, I think their time must have been worse than mine. You know, I mean, you wake up, somebody's missing, no one, they had no clue, to the point that they actually got to a stage where there was almost two camps. One camp was saying Brett's dead and we need to accept it, and we're looking for a body, and the other camp saying forget it, he's alive and we're going to find him alive. And also, you know, I had my daughter, my beautiful little 9-year-old daughter, had written me a note for every single night that I was away, and then that was our first night. So I'd read that note and left it next to my travel documents. And when Wayne Mudder, the birthday boy, had gone down to, somebody had said, "Go and get Brett's travel documents and let's ascertain whether or not his insurance policy includes search and rescue. So they got the document, but when Wayne went to get my passport and that document, he found this little note. And in his agony and mind being so upside down, he read the note, which said, all it said was, "You're my hero. I want to follow in your footsteps till the day I die." My little 9-year-old daughter writing to that to me. And I remember reading it going, "My darling, I love you," and put it down. Wayne read that, and him and I chatted long for many hours the day before, because my business was in trouble, and I'd been sharing with him how hectic a financial situation I was in. And when he read that, he read it as a suicide note and thought that he said, "Guys, we got to contemplate that Brett's actually committed suicide." And then they started arguing around that. So there were many dynamics going on amongst those 8 guys. Also, you got to remember, we'd left South Africa with one very good friend who'd passed away on the Wednesday. We left on the Sunday. His funeral was happening on that Monday. So we were a more morbid bunch of guys. Our other very good friend, we were only 9 of us. We should have been 10. A young Mancunian, born and bred in Manchester. Okay. Edward Pickles living in Dubai. He'd phoned us on the Friday. We'd flown on the Sunday to say he'd been diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma, and he was not able. He was being rushed straight into hospital to have it cut out. And we traveled for 56 hours. I mean, it was a morose bunch of 50-year-olds that just could not contemplate what they were facing at that time.
And then they started planning, having a look at the map, the currents, trying to work out coordinates, but also, trying to figure out what time you actually went overboard. Went back out on the sea later that day, and the Mentawai Strait, I think, goes something like over 200,000 square kilometers.
Yeah,
almost a needle in a haystack, and they found you, or you saw them.
Not even a needle in the haystack. I mean, Mark Ridgway, one of our friends, is also a yachtsman, a skipper, and a helicopter pilot, and he, without having advanced technological equipment, using the old way of folding up a map, actually traced us almost back. He said, "Brett's going to be where on the coordinates that we'd sailed from Padang to Phuket. If we can just work out the current and backtrack our steps," and that's exactly, 12 hours to the hour. In the ship's log, they stopped the boat because they'd seen, I didn't know, they stopped the boat because they'd seen a piece of submerged polystyrene about the size of a human. And they thought that was my dead body. And every now and then the wave would kick it up, and they thought, because of the rain and the storm, they just see this piece of white, and they thought it was either my elbow or the back of my head, being a baldy, my feet, my ankle and knee popping out the water. So they actually stopped the boat to let this piece of polystyrene float up to them. I thought they'd stop the boat because they'd seen me. And I'm cheering. I'm going, "Boys, how are we going to be drinking beer? We're going to be laughing about it." And Adam, I'm not further than 100 meters away from this boat. And 2 of my mates are staring straight at me. What I didn't know at the time was that the rain was lashing down, but it was coming from behind me. So I wasn't being affected by the rain. My vision towards the boat was completely clear. But for them, looking at me, the rain was going straight into their eyes. So they were literally looking over the railing straight down into the ocean. And I thought they were looking straight at me out there, but they weren't. They were just looking straight down. I am screaming. I am waving. I am shouting. I start swimming. I can't get there. This current is too strong. I cannot get to that boat. I put my head down and I swim with everything I've got. I'm doing crawl. I'm hauling myself. And next minute I'm at the back of the boat and I'm not any closer. And I just see these 2 puffs of black smoke as the diesel smoke comes through the engine, and they start the motors up, and they sail away again. Let me tell you, I thought I'd had a meltdown the first time. When I saw them start up and go, I just knew, that's it. I'm not going to be rescued. Because I'd known, one of the positive thoughts I had the whole way through, I knew my mates would come back from me. I knew without a shadow of a doubt. We'd all done military service. We'd been at school together since grade 1. We were close, tight friends. I knew the capabilities of all of them. A lot of us had become officers in the military. I knew the guys knew what they were doing, and they would get close. And how close did they get? God, they got to within 100 meters of me, and then they sailed away again.
It's just incredible.
It's just ridiculous.
Unless you're there, it's so frightening to think about. And you're actually getting quite angry with God at some stages, thinking, are you teasing me here, God? If you want me to die, just let me die.
I can't even share with you the expletives I used in that ocean. In fact, I think I could have rewritten the book of swearing and taking it out on someone. I was so angry with God. And it was quite interesting because I grew up in an incredibly spiritual and religious home. Both my parents were very involved in St. Elizabeth's Church in Westville. I was an altar boy literally from as soon as I was able to. My mum signed me up, and right through to finishing school and taking serious abuse for that in my childhood days. And I was a Sunday school teacher. And you know what? I've always been, I know I've always been close to God, but I was angry with God. I hadn't been a big church goer. Certainly after I went through the military. What I saw up in Angola when in the stupid war we were fighting, we knew nothing about. I was angry, and I let rip. Let me tell you, I gave God a piece of my mind, which rightly or wrongly, I can tell you that anger fueled a desire to survive. It made me want to lash out, and I did. I literally, I really screamed and shouted at God.
But then there seemed to be all these moments that happened over all the hours. We talk about the hallucinations and Virgin Mary, and looking back now, this is several years later, how many of those hallucinations, especially the Virgin Mary, do you think actually that was a sign, that wasn't an hallucination?
Well, I've worked with some of the best minds in this, because the one thing I really struggled with afterwards, after I survived, was trying to figure out why I survived, and how I survived. It really, really freaked my psyche out. And I know, I still have, people ask me if I have nightmares. I don't have nightmares. I hear two things. One was the bell of this boy I saw after seeing the Virgin Mary. But I knew, it was so weird. I knew the Virgin Mary was a hallucination because she was made of Meccano set. She was in this white cloud, but her hands folded, her hair. Exactly the same picture that I used to see in the vestibule of the church I walked into. And I remember, if you managed to watch that 60-minute program, the interviewer there in Australia, Charlie Woolley, he said, "Oh, mate, I bet you indoctrinated at Sunday school, and I bet you played with Meccano as a kid." And I said, "Well, I did play with Meccano, and I don't think I was indoctrinated at Sunday school, but I did go to Sunday school." So I knew that wasn't real, but I was convinced it was a sign. And I remember saying, "God, what's the sign in this? I can see the Virgin Mary. But are you sending the Virgin Mary to tell me this is where it all ends, and I must put my hand out, and now I still want to know how I die? Do I just let go and sink to the bottom?" And it disappeared. That hallucination disappeared. And I remember, even though I knew it wasn't real, I was saying, "Come back, come back." And I remember turning in the water and then seeing this boy, and it was so far away, but I knew I could swim there. And all thoughts of Virgin Mary were forgotten. My focus became, I have to swim to that boy. And that boy was so weird. I've never seen a boy like it. It was bright red, it had a yellow light on it going round and round. It had a bell on it going clang, 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 clang. And I remember that noise and that light, and I kept swimming towards it and swimming towards it, and I got so close to that thing. And it was so real. And I remember I started cramping, and I guess I've worked out with the sports scientist that now I believe I'm going to climb on this buoy, and so my body starts relaxing and automatically start cramping. And I thought, I have to get there. And I put my head down, and I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 strokes, lifted my head up, and there was nothing there. And I'd seen that buoy. I heard that noise. I heard that bell. I saw that light. And I've been so excited because MacGyver, there's a MacGyver in me. I was going to strip the beacon off that and do Morse code to my mates, and a helicopter was going to pick me up, and there was nothing there. And the anger that set in then, I can't even tell you. But then I just cramped completely. But again, something happened. I mean, I was then stung by Portuguese man of war. And I actually was ready to go. I was quite happy to just end my life there and then. And I welcomed that. I remember thinking, at least I know how I'm going to die. I'm going to die from all these blue bottle stings. Yeah. And next minute, I was out the other side. And they were there, and I was here. I still had a few on me. I remember pulling them. And the sports scientist said that actually was one of the things that saved my life. You know, it got my adrenaline going, got me angry again, and all thoughts of cramping and everything were parked. Off I went swimming. I'm going to do this. I can swim. I was talking to Portuguese man of war. I was saying, I'll show you guys. I'm better than you, buddy. You're not putting me down. Bring it on. Is that the best you've got? I had physical conversations with blue bottles in the water.
It almost comes in the book. It's a literal, spark of life they gave you. Yeah, it was a bloody, hurt you, but it sparked you back into life again.
Absolutely. And the same happened with the jellyfish and the seagulls and the shark. All these things happening to me. And a lot of people said to me, "How do you know that the blue bottles weren't? You just seen a Virgin Mary and that was a hallucination. How do you know the blue bottles weren't a hallucination?" I said, well, like, one thing I can tell you, the pain and the burning and the sensations of those, even when I got out the water, I'd been stung by the jellyfish sometime late that night. And when I got out the water, when I was rescued in the early hour, at 7 a.m. the following morning, when I got out the water, I still had all these bright red lacerations on my body from the jellyfish.
And all this time back home in South Africa, your wife, Anita, it was like an FBI investigation room in your house, and it was going global. There was Facebook pages.
Absolutely incredible.
How did you feel again afterwards when you found out all of this had gone on, that people were being reached out to all over the world to help you?
Absolutely incredible. I tell you, So I was the first off the boat. As you know, I stayed on and finished the whole surf trip. And when I was heading home, I phoned, it was incredible. The YPO, Young Presidents Organization, had got involved. And they somehow had found out that I'd landed in Padang and I was flying into Jakarta, and I had a 6-hour delay in Jakarta before my connection to Singapore. And they were there at the airport through Facebook to meet me in Jakarta, and they got me into the first class VIP room in the Jakarta airport, and they got me a phone line to speak to my family, and I phoned my wife, and Anita said to me, "Brett, are you near a computer?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "I'm in the VIP lounge, first class lounge in Jakarta airport." And she said, "Log on and go to a page called Searching for Brett Archibald." And I actually nearly missed my flight to Singapore. I'm sitting in I was the only person in this lounge. A beautiful young lady was kind of the maitre d' of the lounge. And I started reading these Facebook messages, and there were 68,000, Adam, 68,000 people had either read the post, liked it, searched, forwarded, share. I mean, it was just incredible. But there were these messages, just reams and pages, and I'm sitting reading for probably 4 hours, and I'm just crying. And this young, lovely lady comes up and she says, "Mister, are you okay?" And I said, I am, but I've just been through a life-changing experience. I'm just reading about it, and I said, I'm just blown away. And it was mind-blowing. I mean, it was, and I can tell you that I have no doubt in my mind that all those messages and wishes and prayers were the wings under my arms while I was swimming. I know I gave up 8 times. And every time I did, something happened. It got me galvanized back into action. It made me angry, got my heart rate going.
Yeah.
And off I went, I kept swimming.
And then I'll let people read in the book about, you touched on the shark before, the reef shark that was prodding you, which is a sign of, if I'm hungry, I'm going to eat you. And then there was the diving seagulls that were kamikaze after you. And then, of course, miraculously, the following morning, as you said, you were spotted by the Barrenjoey, the name of the yacht, which again, scary things, almost like the stars aligned. That was a group of Aussies who were also on a 50th surfing.
And when I say
well.
synchronicity, coincidence,
Incredible.
These were 9 Australians celebrating a 50th birthday. We were 9 South Africans celebrating a 50th birthday. The 2 guys whose 50th birthday it was, their birthdays were on the same day, which was the day I was rescued. They had the biggest party that night you've ever seen in your entire life, although everybody was so knackered, it didn't last very long because everybody crashed and burned. But it was just uncanny. And again, I mean, if you look at their story, their boat had broken down for numerous reasons. They'd been left. So they were at the end of their holiday. We were at the start of our holiday. Their second last day was the party day. Our second day of the trip was party day. And, this incredible, uncanny knowledge of the ocean. Their skipper, a guy, Tony Doris Elthrington, his little guy on his boat was signing their boat out because they had 2 more days left and then they were going to do the crossing. And when a boat leaves a territory, you sign out and say, give your forward destination. So they were in the Port Authority in Tuapajet, recording that they were going to spend the next day up the coast, and on the Friday they were heading back to Padang. And his little guy overheard our skipper saying that he had a man overboard, and he ran back to their boat and he said, Doris, there's a Sapphire overboard. He's fallen overboard. And when I say crazy stories, Doris's best friend passed away the day I fell overboard, and he'd been notified, and he knew his friend was terminally ill with cancer, but he'd been hanging on for so long, and Doris was actually flying back within a couple of days to go and sit with his friend to say goodbye to him, and then he passed away then. And the guy said it was almost like he couldn't rescue his friend, he couldn't save his friend's life, so he was going to save my life. And he went back to their boat. He said, guys, I'm going out to look for this guy. Who's coming with? And they had 2 doctors on board and a permanent lifeguard, a couple of lifeguards actually, but highly qualified medical guys. And they went out into that storm in a tin boat to the point, they were out there for something like 8 hours in this radical storm, to the point that they actually got to a stage where they had to say to Doris, we have to go back. We're now jeopardizing our vessel because they were just taking on so much water. And he went back to his boat, and they said he was like a man possessed. He was growling, I should have found him. And he paced the deck that whole night. And he noticed a bunch of coconuts floating by, and they were going the wrong direction. And he realized, because of the severity of the storm, that the current had changed direction. And the next morning, when they were allowed to set sail, he just instinct said he was going northwest. And everybody was going back up straight north, and he went northwest and literally sailed straight up to me.
But he even had an argument with the Australians on board about that, and that's when he, as you said, he broke about the coconuts, saying, no, this is where
they had another skipper on board, and the skipper said the other skipper wanted to go back where my boat was going on the line that they'd been looking the day before. And Doris just knew. He knew the current had changed. He said, we're going that way. And they actually had like my guys were having an argy-bargy on our boat, they were having the same on their boat.
But again, you know, talk about coincidence. Imagine if he hadn't have seen those coconuts. I know it's only sounds a small thing, but if you'd not seen them floating
Oh, no,
away in the current.
without a doubt. But that's why I say, I mean, when I say the story has got the most radical little coincidences, and it's so true what you say. I mean, I've never thought about that. But if he hadn't looked down at that moment and seen those coconuts, he wouldn't have realized the current had changed direction and might not have sailed in that direction.
And of course, we're coming to, you know, hour 27, 28 in the water, and you have another close encounter with a boat, an Indian fishing boat that doesn't see you. And that's really the only time almost properly in your story that you almost give up on life. And actually, when the Barrenjoey can see that, you know, the people can see you and they're preparing to come and rescue you, you almost died then, didn't you?
I did. I actually tried. I mean, I'm not proud of it, but so it was just first light. I actually got excited because I'd seen land. I could see land. I didn't realize it was still, the land was 12 miles away or 13 miles away. It's still 27 kilometers from, but it seemed so close to me. And in my mind, I thought, oh, I can swim there. I could see two islands. One was much further than the other. And I was using my little piece of paper and I had to turn and swim towards the furthest one. And as I did that, I saw a little Indonesian fishing boat. And I knew there were just going to be hundreds of fishing boats out that day. The sea was perfect. And I got all excited again. I thought, this is it. I'm rescued. And I tried to shout to these guys, but my tongue was the size of a lemon. It was so swollen from the salt water and everything. I couldn't even make a noise bar some garbled, giggledy goop that came out my mouth. And I realized I can't shout. I've just got to swim there. And I started swimming to this boat, and they started up and sailed away. And I looked at them and I just lost it. I cramped so badly at that moment, I think, from the excitement and the burst of speed to swim towards that boat. And I actually made I just couldn't carry on. My toes, at that stage, my heels of my feet were actually digging into my buttocks because my legs were cramped. My hamstrings were in such a cramp. And I remember just saying, I can't do this anymore. And I made a conscious effort to end my life. I actually swam down. I turned on my back. I don't think I was more than a meter. And I remember putting my arms out and just looking skywards. It was the most beautiful day through the water, just this ripple effect. And I just sucked water into my lungs. And I did that 3 times. And I remember it was so interesting because I got the water in. It was so easy. When it came out, the warm water, now it's warmed up in my lungs. It's coming out over my jagged, shredded tongue. And it was painful. And I remember going, oh, this is not so nice. And the second time, the same thing. And the third time, I thought, Brett, what you ending your life? What do you care that you've got a sore tongue for? And that's when my brain literally, I can tell you, I mean, you've read stories about somebody saying their brain fried. My brain fried. I mean, I thought springs were coming out of my head because my brain was screaming at me saying, what are you doing? What are you It's the most perfect day. It's all logic. You can see land. There are going to be boats. You're going to be rescued. What are you trying to end your life for? And I remember just my brain, my mindset just changing 180 degrees, fighting, coughing, spluttering, getting to the surface, just vomiting copious liters of water out of my lungs. And looking up, and I saw a black cross.
Yeah.
And I actually said, God, shove that where it fits best. I was so angry. And what I didn't realize, I mean, all that was above the water at this stage, but I couldn't even get my arms out the water. They're literally just doing doggy paddle. My nose and my eyes are just above the surface of the water. And that black cross was the top of the mast of the Barrenjoey steaming towards me. I couldn't see. They were under power. They didn't have their sails up, so I couldn't see the rigging. I could just see the mast and this little cross piece, pitch black, and it was this little cross. And I don't know, because of the curvature with my eyes in the water, Doris figured out it was probably the first time I saw them. They were probably about a mile away from me. So that's all I could see, you know, the waves and the little ripples on the water. All I could see was the mast. And then as they got closer, I then realized it was a mast. Then I saw the bow of the boat. Then I saw the hull of the boat. Then I saw a guy sitting on the front of the boat. And I actually didn't even get excited. I just said, there's no way. I can't go through another disappointment. So I'm not getting excited. Until they sail right up to me and pick me up, I'm not getting excited. And I watched them come, and then they turned away. I found out afterwards, they turned 1 degree to starboard. And Doris had actually put his head down and said, he just said, I have to find this guy. And I remember seeing this boat coming to me, and I'm not getting excited. And then they turn away to my left, to their right, to the starboard side of their boat. And I remember asking him afterwards, I said, why did you turn away? And he said he had given me till 7 a.m. He said, if I hadn't found you by 7 a.m., I knew I was looking for a search and rescue. A search and recovery, not a search and rescue. I was looking for a dead body. And this clock had gone 7 a.m. and he put his head down, and he's not a religious man at all. He spoke to his sister who'd passed away some years before of cancer, and his friend who'd just died. Yeah. And he said, guys, you got to help me find the Sapphire. And he said his sister came into his mind and said, Doris, turn 1 degree to starboard. And he just did. So this boat turns away, and I make a pact to myself. I'm going to do one thing. I'm putting my head down, and I'm swimming with everything I've got in that direction. And one of two things will happen. I'm going to count to 300 without lifting my head. When I lift at 300, I'm lifting my head, and one of two things will happen. That boat will be there, and I'll be rescued, or it'll have sailed away, and I'll be so exhausted that I'll just sink to the bottom. Because I knew at that stage wasn't going to reach land. I put my head down and I swam. I thought I was a dolphin. I thought I was Chad Leclos swimming through the ocean, and I lifted my head, 299, 300, I lifted my head, and that boat was right there, and I screamed. And I thought I'd actually said, over here, chaps, over here. And I remember getting on board and saying to them, guys, what did you hear? Did you hear me scream at you? And I said, did you hear me shouting? And they said, yeah, mate, we thought there was a wounded buffalo in the ocean. And then I just heard the roar of this boat. I saw everybody standing up. The boat veered towards me, and I knew in that moment that I was going to be rescued. But my body went into cramp.
It's just...
They said I'd come out the water like a water polo goalie. I was waving. I remember falling back into the water just saying, thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you, God.
Yeah.
And then my entire body just cramped. And I could not keep myself afloat. They threw a life buoy to me. It landed probably a foot in front of me. My body was in such cramp, I could not even reach my hand up to grab that buoy. And I just sank like a stone. And as my eyes went under the water, all I remember is seeing this bloke just launch himself over the bow of their boat in the air. And then I was under the water. And I realized it was somebody diving over, but he was so far away, I thought he's never going to get to me in time. And it was so ironic. I was sinking down, and I remember saying to Anita, I said, baby, but I was actually okay. I knew I'd given up, and I was unhappy about that. And I tried to end my life, fought back from that, and I knew I'd given it everything I had. And I remember sinking down, and I actually said all my goodbyes. I was comfortable that this is where it ended. I just thought it was so sad that I was that close to being rescued. And I actually closed my eyes, and I was just going down. I felt like I was going down like a lead stone. And next minute, this arm came from under both my arms, and my descent stopped. My body checked, and next minute I was going back up in the water. And I remember my face breaking the surface of the water, and I just heard, we've got you, mate, we've got you. And it was one of the lifeguards, Dave Carbon. He realized, he saw me, and he realized I'd gone into cramp. And he knew I wasn't going to be able to swim to that buoy. And in fact, 3 of them all came overboard. And by that stage, he got me up, he got the life buoy. He literally was almost, I think if he had a pair of handcuffs, he would have handcuffed me to that buoy because he was holding me so tight. And they swam me back to their boat.
What was it like when you saw your wife and the kids for the first time afterwards? I bet that was one nice hug, wasn't it?
Look, I mean, I don't think you can ever describe moments like that accurately. I did the most radical thing in that I got onto my boat that night and I phoned my wife and said, I'm not coming home. I'm staying on to finish the surf trip.
What did she say?
And she was like, what? Her cousins had a helicopter on standby. They were coming to fetch me and I was going to be flown home. And I phoned her and said, I'm staying on to surf. And I think I just aged her 100 years. I did a lovely talk a little while ago to a women's group, and I remember afterwards I was standing and I saw this woman striding down the aisle coming towards me, and I thought, oh, she's coming to give me a big hug, and she walked up and she walloped me across the ear. And I said, what was that for? And she said, you should have gone home to your family. But I couldn't. I tell you what, my brain was so fried. I had to come to terms with everything. And my family's happy. In hindsight now, I know for a fact, if I'd come home then, I would have ended up in a mental institution. I don't think I could have dealt with it. But those 2 weeks afterwards, sitting with my mates, talking to the Aussies, so many people I met doctors that had been working with boats, trying to find me. I mean, I met the most incredible people that had been so involved in trying to, sadly, none of them found me, but they were all involved in the search. And I learned so much because I couldn't work out how I'd fallen overboard. Yeah. And I found out it was my vagus valve. I didn't even know we had a vagus valve, but everybody's got a valve in their throat that it controls the oxygen to the brain, and when you're being so violently ill, it's like a valve. It just shuts off and you faint. And that's because I was being so sick overboard. That's exactly what happened. It just shut off and I blacked out and I fell overboard. And I came back and I had a long trip home, which was 90% of it was all on my own. I was fortunate to stop in Singapore for quite a long time. And I had two very good friends of mine that lived there and were based there, and they met me at the airport, and we just spent some incredible time together. And I flew home to my family, and there are no words to describe that. And I think that comes across in the book. I realized while I was in the ocean that there's only three things in my life, and I call them my 3 Fs, and that's my faith, my family, and my friends. Yeah. And when those things are all in sync and all in balance, that's all I need in my life. That I'd been a different cat. I'd run a big corporate. I'd worked for a big American corporate. I'd chased the wrong things in life. And it was kind of the biggest wake-up call that I need in my life. And my life changed 180 degrees. There's not a day that goes by that I don't thank God and all those people that helped were there for me. And thank my family. Our family's changed. Our family dynamic is at a level that I don't think it ever would have been had this not happened to me. And I was actually asked the question, I get asked it often, whether if I had the choice to go through that again and have my life where it is now, or never go through it. And obviously I don't know what my life would have looked like, but I kind of got an idea. And I can tell you, I'd choose going through that all over again 100 times to be where I am now, So it's been an amazing experience, an amazing life-changing experience. And hopefully those that listen to your podcast, Adam, will get something out of this and be able to get some takeaways from it.
Brad, your story is absolutely, it's incredible. Is it going to go to Hollywood? Are we going to be seeing a movie?
You know what? I'm under quite strict. But yes, it is. I was very fortunate. Our book launched I was on the NBC Today show, the morning show, one of the most watched television programs in the world, in December 2017. In fact, I was the last person ever interviewed by Matt Lauer just before he was fired it was the time of the Weinstein debacle, and he was just ostracized and kicked out of. So Matt Lauer was also held up for all these crazy, part of the Me Too campaign, and he was seriously ostracized. But I was fortunate enough to be on the NBC Today show, and my book was launched there. And I came back to South Africa in the December that year, and literally was just inundated with offers, movie offers out of Hollywood. And to be fair, it's been a 2-year process to get to where I am. But yes, we have a signed movie deal. COVID has obviously thrown a massive spanner in the works, so I'm not sure when that'll kick off. But we have an incredible person working on the script formation right now. So yeah, you will be seeing, I don't know what it'll be called. I don't know who's going to play me or who's going to be in it.
Well, Brett, that was my
final. It is going to be a movie.
Yeah, that was my final question. Everybody, out there, all the actors, what actor would you like playing yourself? You must have thought about this.
No, you know what's so interesting? I've been asked that question so many times. And I think for me, I love movies. I'm an avid movie guy. I'm an avid movie watcher. And I think the person who could probably play me the best is someone who really believes in true life stories. And there's a number of actors in the field today that are, I don't know if you've been watching, but Mark Wahlberg's one of them, Matt Damon. A lot of the guys kind of my era, although they're much younger than me, but that kind of era is looking, I think people are realizing that, well, Hollywood's realizing that made up stories are not necessarily what people want to see anymore. People want to be exposed to true life drama because that's what they can relate to. Everybody. And I think my story, or our story right now, one of my titles is Treading Water in Turbulent Times. And I've been able to adapt that thread of story, linking my story and what I went through and all the people on our boat and the Australians and everything with COVID. I mean, no one knows. I didn't know if I was ever going to be rescued. No one knows where COVID's going to end. Yeah. There are so many parallels to what the world's gone through with COVID that this story is, and I would really urge, not because I'm honestly not trying to do a sales pitch for the book, but you've read the book. There are many flows and takeouts throughout that book that people can use in this time. Because sometimes it's so overwhelming. I can tell you over and over again how overwhelmed I was in that ocean. I time and time again, I'd create positive situations. I'd get my adrenaline going. I'd be pumped up and boom, I'd get smashed down again. Yeah. And I know people. I mean, there are people without jobs. There are people with being evicted from their homes. There are homeless people out there. All of them are going through all those same emotions that I had condensed into 28 and a half hours and the years after to what people have been going through. We in South Africa have been in lockdown for 62 days. Yeah. There are people that just can't comprehend that. And our lockdown has been serious. You guys in the UK have at least been able to walk around for a couple of hours a day. You can get hold of alcohol, cigarette. This country is shut down. No alcohol, no cigarettes. I'm not a smoker, but I know I've got close family friends. People have been through traumatizing moments in so many levels of their life.
What I'll do, Brett, I'll put all the links to the Brett Archibald Foundation and the book, etc., on my socials. I'll tell you what then, I'm going to ask you one final question because I know we're pressed for time. I'm not going to ask you then about, as I asked you before, about who would play in the movie. We'll go to music.
Oh, I didn't. Yeah. The two, number one would be, one is two people. I'd either like Matt Damon or Mark Wahlberg. But I don't think they've both got lovely heads of hair. I don't think either of them shave their heads. Well, yeah, but we'll see.
You go through in the book about your iPod playlist. So what would be the theme music to the start of your movie? A bit like a James Bond movie. What song would you want?
Black Betty Bambalam.
Tune.
That's how the movie will open on that. That's what I was listening to. That's what I was listening to, and I walked onto the boat.
That's brilliant.
Black Betty Bam Bam. Whoa, I don't even know who sings it, but
I don't, but it is a good song. It's a brilliant song. Brett, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on Behind the Life. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. Your story's incredible. It's miraculous. You're an incredible person, and it's just been such a joy speaking today. So thank you so much.
Adam, thank you. I'm honored and blessed to have the opportunity to be on your show, and I hope it goes far and wide, and many, many people listen to this. God bless everybody, and take care
and
during these crazy times.
Thank you, Brett. You take care. And that was another episode of Behind the Life podcast with myself, Adam Lambert. Please give me a follow on Instagram at Behind the Life podcast, Facebook Behind the Life podcast, and if you're listening to this on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button below as well as the like button. I'll be back soon for another episode. For now, take care.